A strong and healthy workplace, as we discussed this morning, allows employees to create, to challenge, and to grow businesses, their ideas and themselves to reach peak performance. The workplace is a place where employees need to make connections to their teams and colleagues, to the business, and to be more effective. To do this well, strong connections are based on emotions. They're not really based on practicalities, and really truthfully, they're not really based on technology. We need to be more able to consider the workplace in these emotional terms, as scary as that can be for some of us, me included, to make these connections more quickly and to make these connections ones that last. I'm hoping the technology's working, do tell me if it's not. So a quick introduction to my work history. Many years ago, I studied organisational behaviour at university. And how then that took me into construction and then into facilities, I'm not entirely sure, but it did. And as part of that, I've been very fortunate to combine that knowledge with the study of employee engagement for a number of years. Moving into construction 20 years ago, and the unique challenges of the rail side and the heavy civil side, which I've always worked in, bring, I suppose, a real slant to the workplace that other industries just don't have. We are a form for function industry in rail. We have to be. Our workplaces have to be very task specific. As the lady from Hitachi Rail was saying earlier, you work in a depot and it has to do a specific thing. We're there to maintain trains. We're there to repair engines. There's not really a lot of glamour in that. There's a lot of oil. Well, except for my colleague from Southampton's depot, and he uses electric trains, so I always say he doesn't look after real ones. So more so than many others, we have to be very, very task specific in what we do. I'm sure when you hear the name Siemens, you probably think about some really beautiful workspaces. You probably think about, you know, these fantastic offices. If anybody lives in the north of England and you go down Princes Parkway, you'll see the main Sir William Siemens house, which is beautiful. You know, 21st century technology company, cutting edge. No, not where we work. Well, why doesn't it not work that way for us? Well, you can see. We're in essence, we're a great big garage. We just have bigger cars than everybody else. Even though within that function we have unique challenges, we look after diesel trains, we have to handle a lot of fluids, we have the ever-present risk of environmental hazard, we have the ever-present risk of danger to our staff, danger to the equipment, we have overhead line. So these are all challenges, but our workspace was built for those. It wasn't built for the people. We just kind of happened to be there. Offices, welfare, God forgive us, even stores. You know, these things have been cut back to the bone because, truthfully, when the depot was built, we needed to save money. I'd love to say that it was anything other than that, but I'd be lying. But these things have come because they have to be. We haven't considered, are they right for us? Are they right for the task? Are they going to help our people work better? At 3 o'clock in the morning when it's absolutely chiming down, is it going to help our people connect and feel inspired and actually want to go back out into the rain and get the train out on time for 5:15? I've got to tell you, no, they don't really. And we rely on the fact that we buy the right type of tea. I know we talk about toilets and tea often at these events, but it keeps us going. It keeps the lads going out in the cold. But we're going on a journey now as a business, and I realise that a lot of you, especially the people who do work in the nice 21st century offices, will probably look at us and go, and how is this groundbreaking? But it is for us. It's a real journey for us. And we're looking at our workplace, we're looking at being better, we're looking at being smarter, and our integration into that is a fundamental part of how we do it. Okay, so what is workplace? Well, that's what the Oxford English Dictionary says workplace is. It is a place where people work. Well, it means a lot of different things to everybody, and everybody's experience will be unique to them based on their age, based on their role, their industry that they work in. So some of the more mature ones, myself included, we think about workplaces as being driven by function. we don't really think about. Pleasantries, you know, often workplaces are a big magnolia box. They're full of lines of desks. If you're very lucky, there's big shiny glossy offices around the side that you can aspire to. As I understand it, millennials won't go to work now unless the workplace does the job for them, ticks the boxes. Is it a space to meet? Is it a space to integrate? Have they got a concierge? Concierge, as far as I was concerned, was someone who worked in a hotel. I didn't even think you had these in offices, but can you relax there? Can you relax at work? That's a whole other conversation. How times are really changing. As we keep saying, that we define by the industries we serve, and this means constraints on safety, security requirements. You know, an office in London, well, previous to the last 10 years maybe, would not be as secure as a Ministry of Defence base. Proximity of the general public, you know, going back to the rail industry, stations quite like the general public. We don't want you anywhere near us, we're dangerous. And these workplaces can also be the last area to be considered and the first area to be cut. In any development, growth or build, it's the sacrificial lamb. The QSs get hold of it and we get these magnolia boxes. Apologies if anyone is a QS. In my previous role, no names, this was a global business that was part of a really, really big global business that may or may not have yellow diggers. Wasn't the yellow digger business I'm going to talk about. Now, they sold all over the world. My role specifically was European, so this was not a small business, but its primary location, the place where its engineering director lived, was a porter cabin in a service yard. So we thought it was okay to bring clients to a porter cabin in a service yard and try and sell them multi-million-pound orders for engineering works. Needless to say, it was always an uphill struggle. If we'd maybe thought about that and connected with that differently, we could have made it easier for ourselves. So, contrary to popular belief, as we consider the evolution of the workplace, I'm not quite old enough to remember these, but these are very function-driven spaces. Very little space was wasted. Everything was activity-driven. Everything was linked to the task at hand. Perhaps one day they were considered very efficient because there was very little gap. You didn't have to go far to speak to a colleague, to speak to a manager. However, what they did suffer from the most, especially in the left two pictures, was a distinct lack of circulation, often to the point of danger. Moving around in them was very difficult. We already know now that this moving around, this circulation of staff in the workplace, is what gives us some of our key conversation moments, the water cooler moment, the dreaded phrase, where we actually connect with people in other departments. We connect with people who are not immediately linked to us, but we find common ground and we find the next step. And though these pictures do show staff members working in close proximity, communication was frowned on, very much so. Again, because I like to work in stories, there is a business locally to me in Manchester, and I'm really not explaining who this is other than to say it has a production line. And as late as 1996, if you were caught talking on the production line, you would put a Polaroid in your wage slip. If you got 3 in succession, you were sacked. That was their understanding of workplace communication, that it was something that was to be frowned upon. The directors could do it, the managers could do it, but not the workforce. Again, how times have changed. We go on to evolution, and I'm sure everyone now has had experience of these delightful places to be. As somebody who truly loathes the open plan call centre environment, and yes, has worked in one, I am a fierce critic of this to be considered an improvement. It doesn't look like much of an improvement. In these environments, non-specific communication wasn't as frowned upon, but it certainly wasn't easy. You would feel very intimidated, a little bit self-conscious about speaking to somebody, certainly even speaking to someone across the desk, because everyone could hear you, everyone. You can't speak, you can't take phone calls, you can't, even just walking around you're thinking, oh, am I disturbing people? Maybe I shouldn't do this. But you have to tiptoe everywhere and not speak. I mean, I'm sure there's still workplaces like that, but thankfully they're getting less. So to tackle this, the dreaded acoustic screen was born. And suddenly we could do work and speak to people on the phone, but not exactly a team spirit kind of place. And everything is the same colour. Everything is a little box. We don't want cellular offices. We want to pull away from this. We want open plan, but we know that doesn't work. Let's make a beehive. It works in nature. Does it work for us? I'm not sure. Thankfully, the development of workspace is moving away from these approaches, and we are looking at it differently, both in terms of technology and now, as the panel said this morning, bringing it back into the cultural space, bringing it back into the office environment, but as an improvement. We need to think about task, yes, but we need to think about adjacencies within the team, within our wider teams, within the information that we need, the materials, the supports, that will help us to find a more effective and more nuanced solution to what we need. I'll talk about budget later, but obviously anything that's effective has to be good to the bottom line. So now we're considering things in the terms of these connections and in terms of the connection to the customer base. So, well, why does it matter really? You know, I'm sure people will still buy us off us. But it matters because we can't do a lot without them. If you think about a business structure as the brain, it's the neurons, the connections within it that will allow the information to flow, allow the information to move. And that will help the business succeed. We need to connect to other humans to be effective. How many times do we hear now about loneliness, about being so much a prisoner of the technology that we use all the time, that we never speak to people, that we never have to speak to people? You could do everything on Skype without even putting your camera up. And yes, I'll be as guilty of that as the next person. I don't ever put my camera up because then everyone would know I'm doing my emails at the same time. And that's shameful as well. We're designed to work together. And when we work together and we work at our best, we're at our most creative. When we have other people to bounce ideas off, when we feel a sense of belonging to a group, we're able to engage more fully and to perform better. Measuring that engagement is tricky. How do you measure how engaged people are? Is it how happy they are? Is it how satisfied they are? Is it have they got enough money? Well, as a slight aside, Gallup, oh God, even more than 20 years ago, were asked how to measure engagement. So Marcus Buckingham, if anyone is familiar with Q12, apologies for telling you all about it again. Marcus and his team spent quite a while developing Q12, 12 questions. And this was distilled from oceans of analysis data, and even I'm not willing to go trawl through that, I just stick with the 12 questions. And it's still used today by organisations all over the world to measure where they stand and dip test how well they're engaged within their business. If you want a great guide to this, the book that goes with it is the masterclass in how to change workplace environments to suit different scenarios. Within this distillation of measuring engagement and seeking peak performance, 2 of the 12 questions, so 2 of something that is used globally to assess engagement, directly relate to workplace. They ask, do I have the materials and equipment to do my work right? They consider materials and equipment not just to be things, but to be conversations, to be connections, to be information. They also ask, and this is a tricky question, I acknowledge, do I have a best friend at work? Now, there's a concept. It's an emotive thought. Does my workplace allow me to make connections that are so strong, I would consider the people I know there to be a best friend? Now, we're not very good at sort of thinking in those terms, are we? We're terribly British and stiff upper lip and, you know, we go to work to do a job. But actually, no, we need that. We need that sense of belonging, the sense of commonality, because then we're all working together. It's not just one, it's all of us, even if all of us is just 2 of us. Marcus did coin the phrase, that the manager is the lens to which the employee sees the organisation. Now, regardless of how you feel about that statement, it's probably true. Everybody says we don't leave companies, we leave managers. Again, we leave people, not businesses. If it is true, then the workplace is the interface. It's the place where we come, where we are together, where we connect to the business, where we understand what we're meant to do. We understand how we're meant to achieve it. We talked earlier about home working, and the guys from Royal London were talking about improving their home working scenario. And then straight away, the guys from Nomad Foods were saying, yes, but that can even foster an even greater sense of loneliness, an even greater sense of disconnection, because you're not together. There's a limit to how much Skype can do. Sometimes you just have to be in the same room. The workforce is changing, business is changing, and as was said earlier as well, everything is in the moment now, moment to moment. Who remembers the good old days of phone calls and letters, and you got 7 days to reply to a question? I'd kill for that now, truthfully. You know, and that awful thing that people do where they send you an email and then they ring you and say, have you read it? And the first time I caught myself doing it, it was like, oh my God, I can't believe I've just done that. And I do it more and more, which is awful. But this is so much pressure on people, so much pressure to perform, so much pressure to understand all of the situation straight away. If we give the workforce a safe place, a structure in which that they can respond and operate within these ever-increasing constraints, surely that helps them to remain loyal and focused and to see the company's best interests and how it aligns with their own. We mentioned that connections are emotional. They're not logical, and it's how we describe the workplace, how we describe any environment, not just our workplace. I'm sure we've said it a million times about hotels, restaurants, even train carriages. We use very emotive languages to get our feelings across and how we consider it to ourselves. And we use positive and negative words to describe workplaces, and we are programmed to the negative words because we associate them with something unpleasant. You know, how many times do we describe a workplace as cold, unwelcoming, empty, God forbid, soulless? Worked in a couple of those. These are very, very emotive words, and straight away you have a picture in your mind. You can see that. Usually you probably see a call centre, but you can see it straight away. So why does engagement matter to us? You know, we've talked about why connections matter, but why does engagement matter? Well, as part of the same survey, Gallup identified attributes to staff who were engaged. I mean, I'm sure that you all manage teams of various sizes, businesses of various sizes. How would you feel if your workforce had 67% less absenteeism? How would you feel if they delivered 6 times the level of their current performance? And how would you feel if they were 3 times more likely to stay with you in 3 years? Less churn, less chaos, less retraining costs. I think we'd all pounce on that. We'd love that. That's what you get. That is the gift of an engaged employee. Unfortunately, not all of them are. In fact, based on Marcus's survey, Gallup's survey, only 16%, and this is from a UK survey, this is not the worldwide one, 16% of employees in any given organisation are fully engaged, are fully present. 60% are just not engaged. They spend probably a great deal of time going. They won't really do much of anything. They won't be destructive, but they won't do much. They'll be a passenger. They'll tick along and they'll retire on active duty and that'll be fine and they'll take their pension. Great. It's not doing a lot for you. It's not doing a lot to forward your organisation's goals. That said, the remaining 24% are actively disengaged and they will be disruptive. They're going to work as hard as they can to get the rest of the people disengaged along with them. By pushing to engage with the 60% and increasing that high number, just think about the performance changes you could make. It would be fantastic. As an organisation and as a workforce, we're remarkably quiet about speaking up, about saying, we don't like this environment, can we consider it differently? I know there's some very talented FMs in the room, And I don't take anything away from that. I have enjoyed the presentations and the feedback in these conferences for years. But I still say that we're a long way from developing our workspaces beyond the practical, and I'm not counting Google in this. That would be a debate for a whole other day. Our homes are places where we can display our personality, where we can be multisensory. Why don't we do it at work? We know the sore points in the workplaces. Visually, the dreaded magnolia box, Exhibit A. Or even worse, the magnolia box full of magnolia cubicles. The perennial noise issue. Is it too loud? You have that one person who makes a conference call in the middle of the office. Can you ever get away from that? The eating at the desk thing, which I have to tell you as an industry, rail is shocking for this. We're so bad at coming away from the desk. But you always have that one person who has fish pie and thinks it's okay to microwave it and bring it through to the office. So happy about that. Links to the world outside, even plants. I know that we've probably beat biophilia to death over the last few years, but it's true. And not just plants. There's something that comforts staff, that outside those four walls there's life. And maybe areas that don't get considered as often in the previous agendas. We might be comfortable, but how tactile are our workspaces? As humans, we're quite tactile people. If you go in and everything is the same hard white laminate desktop for as far as the eye can see, it's not very motivational, you know. I mean, for us, it's a big wash of beach because that's just the corporate thing. And if possible, can we bring in different textures? Can we look at creating movement in the space? Can we look at creating somewhere where people feel that they want to be? And then, how well are we connected with our colleagues and our friends? Do we have human moments, water cooler moments? Can we speak to them and build these diverse groups? I visited a railway factory in Germany that had been there since 1920 and whose staff, all of whom pretty much to a man were over 45, were fiercely loyal to the organisation, despite working in sheds that, truthfully, I would have probably condemned. And the company demonstrated loyalty in return by showcasing the staff. And one way that they did it, and believe me, it sounds stupid, but it worked. Every single image that was in the corporate offices, in the boardrooms, in the meeting rooms, was taken by a professional photographer on the shop floor of the staff doing their job. I mean, yeah, all right, they did it so that the sparks came up off the angle grinder, it looked a bit arty, but it was all the people in that business, and they rewarded that loyalty and that showcasing with absolute trust in the company. Wherever that company was going, they were going with it. So the main issues we've talked about, and I'm sure I'm not telling any FMs in the room things that you don't already know. Bizria and the collaborators on biophilia, on IEQ, have taken us so far. We've considered things like desking layout. Are we comfortable? Are we practical? How near is the coffee? Sound and acoustic management. Can we think about the structure of the building differently? Can we use it to help us drive improvements so that it doesn't become a disturbance or make people uncomfortable? Again, lighting and external lighting transfer. We're using the building itself more than we ever have. Thermal comfort. Always the bugbear. Everyone's either too warm or too cold. My personal one, floor vents. Hate them. Anyone who works with or for me in an office will know that I'm a big believer in placebo controls on the wall, so that people can turn it up or down to their heart's content. Does nothing for the building, but they feel better. And then the last element of open workplaces that we maybe haven't covered before, privacy, security, difficult topic. Unless you give everyone a desk or a locker, clear desk policies with these horrible lockers all the way around the room. The big one for me, technology. We said before, technology gives you the keys to the kingdom. You can get into everything that business has from one device. And yet we get up and we wander off. And no one does that. Windows key and L, that is your friend. I threaten to send emails from my colleagues' terminals to their manager when they don't do it. So you'll usually only have to send one, and then they remember. But we're perpetually leaving the gate open to the castle. We're not protecting who we are and where we've come from. And then 4 of these items relate specifically to a physical sense, to an emotion. But we're not allowing people to develop that and feel safe in the space. It's a fundamental need to feel safe. We need to be able to drive that so we can connect better. How can we help as FMs? We are the subject matter experts. Many of us have come from a construction background, so we know how buildings are built. Many of us have come up within the business, so we know how the business was built. Bringing those two together is a very, very powerful tool. You can then take that, you can be that bridge between practicality and between those comfort elements, and you can demonstrate the clear benefits of cost effectiveness. And I do say cost effectiveness, not cost reduction. We have the tools now to show that bottom line improvement in productivity, and therefore in improved revenue, is directly linked to workplace evolution. But we're not taking it, we're not stepping up. We're still complaining that everyone tells us about toilets and tea, when we have the tools to take it to the board and say, no, hang on, we can do this now. And when it does go wrong. These are just two personal favourites, and I'm sure you've seen them on the internet. They've been memed to death. Given that the left-hand one is a staircase, I find those truly, truly terrifying. But another story from a friend of mine, it's my friend's story, and it's an insurance company who will most certainly remain nameless. But in the 1990s, they did their offices with the craze of the time. Who remembers feng shui in offices? And they paid a fortune for this consultant to come in and tell them everything about it, and they had to be softer. Workplace had to be softer. So they had to have a carpet that was all blue and white and had swirls and brought the water in and made them feel like you were connecting with the external environment. But the swirls didn't go in a straight line, they kind of wandered off. And yes, a number of people walked into walls, especially if they were walking down through corridors without paying attention to where they were going. Okay, so I'll end on two case studies that we have. This is our specific depot, our specific home. And this is case study 1, improving our common areas, or as my boss says, for God's sake, get rid of the magnolia. And this is our primary welfare corridor and our mess room. I'm sure you would all love to spend the day there. Doesn't it look engaging? And we've built our Tuscan picnic area there in the service yard. Through the trellis there, you can see the fuel tanks and the attractive railway sidings. I know everyone is jealous. And then on the right, you can see some of the visual mock-ups that we've got for making some alterations to the wall. I have to do baby steps. You know, these are engineering technicians who don't quite see the point. But we'll get them there slowly. We'll help them. I mean, the point of the map is to help them engage with other businesses within mobility, so they know what we're all doing. They can feel part of the bigger family. And then case study 2, otherwise known as stop eating at your desk. So the left-hand picture shows our upstairs office, which controls pretty much the whole of the project that supports our fleet across 7 depots and outstations in the north of England. Doesn't really look like it does that, does it? And if I tell you that's halfway through the improvement process, yeah, I'll leave you to imagine what it was like before. But we have permission, admittedly it's not a huge budget, but it's still permission, to create some breakout spaces, to create some softer spaces, even to put our very own outside-in window on the wall. A small thing, I realise, but a big journey for us, and hopefully the staff will get something from it. And just before Charlotte comes back in and growls at me very fiercely, that's it for me. So does anybody have any questions?